I don't see that there are like 75 screens, so that's positive.
Okay, that's fine. Welcome, Heron. I've got an agenda just up at your seat right there as well. And then we'll have to touch base after the meeting and set up a
Yes, please
training
do.
time.
As I try to get into my box, the only thing I got was a message box. I didn't get anything for here.
Okay, we'll get it figured out.
Plan well.
Everyone else always knows.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is a pretty small community.
Sure. Heron. Like the bird.
It's
with a D
easier.
on the end of it.
In the day.
The great blue.
Yeah. Yeah, that's long gone, hasn't it?
You were in that meeting. Great.
Did you get the agenda okay?
I did not. I've got, is this what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, I got one that came earlier, so
Yeah.
this is the white.
Intro video?
Yeah.
It's good now? Okay.
Is this? Yeah. Greg Wilson, Ray Wilson.
He talks really quickly. Yep.
What's the first name?
No.
Last name. Here. This is his first.
Yeah, yeah, welcome. It's been good. How the hell is it go?
He's not gonna be here. He's forward.
This is the second ticket.
Yes. Yeah.
You weren't here for the dogs.
Oh, yeah, that was way before my time.
That was
Oh, the dog, that was back to
That was-
the fire.
Yeah, that's, yeah,
and they
but
were
I heard a lot
crazy
about it.
people.
I heard a lot about it.
Eric,
Yeah, we did not.
Yeah.
no, we didn't. Eric.
Yeah, they've had to almost completely go that place. They've actually done a pretty decent job with it. But
Do you know who would do it?
I don't know. Yeah.
Any house in the neighborhood, just like, oh, my son's moving back.
Oh, really?
There.
It'd be good to go.
We just, so Loki's just moved.
Okay, we're all set up over here, Nan, when you're
Ready?
ready. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
down to the.
Yeah, down there.
Yeah, I heard that happen. Okay, welcome. We'll get started. Welcome to the North Logan Planning Commission meeting tonight. Everybody's here. We've asked, who we asked? Eric to give a prayer and Jeff to give the pledge.
Yep.
So what comes first?
Pledge.
Pledge.
All
Jeff?
right. All right, please repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Heavenly Father, we are thankful for the opportunity we have to gather here tonight in this forum. We are grateful for our city and for our citizens, grateful for the many good things that we are blessed with, for the moisture that we have received. We are thankful for the liberties that we enjoy. we would pray that as we meet this evening, that as we discuss the affairs of the city, business as before us, that we might be wise. We might be able to follow the rule of law and do those things that will be to the benefit of our city and our citizens. We pray that we might be able to do our best to uphold the law and to help this community to flourish and to do well. We pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jeff and Eric. Just a minute before we get started, we have a new board member. Heron, would you just take a minute and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Heron Hoyt. Moved into North Logan in October of '72. My wife and I have 6 children. I spent 37 years in the classroom as a public teacher in the Logan City School District. Sorry about that, Cache County, but all of my kids went to Skyview, so we had a trade-off. I'm interested in North Logan City. It's my home, and I love it here. And I have grown to love the people who live in North Logan. The demographics have changed a great deal since we first moved in. But the needs of the community are still the same. We still need to plan and be organized for the future. And this has got to be our focus. We can't plan for here and now. It's got to be the planning for down the road. So that's my purpose and why I accepted this position, is to help that process go forward. So if you have any questions, go ahead and ask. If I can change somebody's grade that needs to be changed.
Thank you.
Anyway.
I kind of feel like a rose among the thorns up here, you guys.
Oh, this is a rough crowd.
It is a rough crowd, I'll tell you. All right, we need a motion to approve the agenda.
Make a motion to adopt the agenda as outlined.
Have a-
Seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt the agenda of January. What was the agenda? Tonight,
January
January 6th. All of for it?
Aye.
Any against? Okay. Motion passed. We don't have any minutes to approve, maybe next meeting. And any follow-up issues?
Yeah, so a couple of things from City Council last night. The Smiling H subdivision spent quite a bit of time in City Council working through several concerns. That concept plan was approved by the City Council with several conditions. The first being the option showing a cul-de-sac on the north end rather than a right-hand turn only onto 8th East. The cul-de-sac was the one that was approved. And then also some setback variances for a larger front setback on a couple of lots to meet with requirements.
So is there access off of 8th East?
On the south side of 2500 North, there is still an access point. On the north side, there is no access.
Okay.
So
To 8th
it's
East.
off of 25th and then off of 6th.
Okay.
Are there 2 access points on the
Yeah.
north side?
And are they doing south or north first? Do we know?
I'm not sure what their plans. I think they're going to take it potentially in 2 chunks, but we'll know a little more in the development plan, which I'd expect to come in front of you in the next, probably not next meeting, but maybe the one after or the one after that. We'll probably see that back in for development. So the other thing that went into City Council as a public hearing was that Ingress Egress ordinance. The City Council opted to, with under staff recommendation, wait to approve that until we just get a thorough red line from legal, just to make sure it's airtight on that front. So they held the public hearing, but didn't make a motion or take action last night.
And where will that ordinance sit? Will that be in subdivision design standards?
Yeah, so that's found in the subdivision development regulations,
Okay.
is where that's located.
And was there public input?
There was one citizen stood up and gave some input, but not a lot on that item.
And that's it for them. Thanks. Okay, we'll move on to our first item of business. Consideration of possible recommendation of a request for post-division approval of improper subdivision, including approximately 6.3 acres located approximately 2100 east, 2500 north. The proposed post-division approval includes 3 lots in the RE1 zone, and all lots proposed include at least 1 acre. Spencer, do you want to get us started?
Yes, I'll briefly step through this. We did discuss this item last meeting, but I'll give another brief overview just as a refresher. So this is this property is located just north of our cemetery here along that road there, which would be 2500 north. And it does involve just 3 parcels that were divided without using a subdivision method. So the application is for a post-division approval, lot legitimization, which was a recent ordinance which was passed. And that goes through the Planning Commission and then on to the City Council for final approval. I'll step into our staff report on that. Just to go over basically what the staff report is it has that improper subdivision ordinance language, and then kind of a commentary on the application itself. So in the first section of the requirements of this application, it has to be divided more than 10 years. They have to be defined as innocent owners. This application meets both those stipulations very clearly. So this next section here, the Planning Commission has to determine if it meets the development standards. All the lots are the correct size. They're all over 1 acre. They have the frontage widths, sizes for the zone. So the one concern that staff pointed out or just decided to, or was going in more in depth from last meeting, was the width of the road and getting more defined measurements. So we had a staff member, Alan, went up and visited the site, and he moved snow away. It's kind of covered now with our snowy conditions, and took some measurements. So what he found was above the canal or east of the canal, the roadway, including the gravel on the sides, which counts towards the access road width, was 20 feet in width. So from the canal crossing all the way east up to the property and beyond was 20 feet in width. From the canal crossing west, the widest point, and this is, he basically took and removed the snow and measured from vegetation to vegetation. So wherever there was grasses or weeds starting to grow, that's where he'd measure from. So it was the asphalt plus whatever was drivable before you got into growth. And that was the widest point that he measured was 16 feet. Most areas were measuring about 14 to 15 feet. The most narrow was at about 13 feet. That's not to say there's not the space to expand the road, like between fences. There's some rocks at that 13-foot place, especially that could be removed. But that's just current conditions. One note that the road right now is 11 feet from snowbank to snowbank as plowed. But he removed the snow to get those measurements. It's a little tough to plow it much wider than that because of where the fences are and property is. We've sent some mailboxes up into trees, is what I've been told from the snowplow drivers. If you go too fast, that snow just kind of picks things up and throws it. So that's how the conditions now, according to our measurements. So with that, and just from, we were able to meet and I know Jeff was in that meeting, Emily, with our legal counsel as well, just regarding the code. So with this application, staff does, just as a finding, find that the application meets the requirement as innocent owners, that it could be applicable for the improper subdivision, post-division approval. The other finding we found is just that the road access wise from the canal west to 1600 doesn't meet the 20 feet in width. And there was back and forth the last meeting as if it was 26 or 20. I think with digging into code and conversations with the applicants, that number is 20, I think, with what we've adopted as a city, that it doesn't meet that 20 feet just west of the canal, which would mean it doesn't meet our access requirements. So approval would basically be if the Planning Commission determines that it doesn't have to meet that 20-foot width, that code doesn't apply. Or there's an exception to that code for this application, is essentially what it boils down to. So that is just going over briefly. I'm sure the applicant may have some things to add. Maybe Jeff, who was in that meeting, may have some things to add to that as well.
Question.
Yes.
What's the width of the, who's responsible for the road west of the canal? And what is the width between the fences of the property?
Right. Yeah. So it does vary from property to property. As far as who's responsible, I mean, it is city right of way. And so the city is responsible for that road. As far as timeline goes, we do have a lot of roads in our network that are due to be replaced. So as far as who's responsible to put it in, we're not necessarily saying that this is something the developer would have to put in for approval, but it's also not on our timeline to improve with the timeline that they're hoping to build either. So we do plow it and maintain it. We do hope to eventually get this widened out just anyway and up to the rural road standard. But we do have some other roads that are really high on our priority list. 2300 North being the main one that we're focusing on now, and others in the system as well.
So right now it's only a 1-car lane.
No, I think a lot of places cars can pass, especially in the summer or in dry conditions. Cars can pass. I think there's a couple choke points, so that 13-foot area gets a bit tight, especially because there are rocks there, which rocks can be moved. But so that's a kind of a choke point. Then the problem usually arises if, say, there's been a lot of rain. Those shoulders can get a bit soggy outside of the gravel, asphalt area. And say if there's a car parked on the side, that becomes an issue, especially for a larger vehicle like a fire truck or an ambulance. If that was the case, if somebody need to get up to that home, that's where the concern arises. I think in prime conditions, not as much of an issue.
But right now with the snow and pushing it, it's probably 1-car width.
Right. Yeah. 11 feet right now with the snow. So unless your car can go up and around those snowbanks, then yeah. And I don't know what they're at now. We had some rain and things got knocked down, but yeah.
Okay, discussion committee. Thoughts?
No, I'll second the width measurements. I went up and measured as well. So, yep. Yeah, the width is missing on the road.
Jeff, you have
Sure, yeah. So let me, so I've put quite a bit of time into trying to understand this. I've talked several times with the applicants and appreciate their feedback and keeping me honest as I've tried to research and understand what's going on. I took and compiled kind of my story as I went through the review process, and if I can, I'll take a few minutes and kind of walk you through the things that I've learned, noted, and documented, and then ultimately kind of where I'm sitting with things as I speak right now. So this new ordinance that we're really kind of executing right now as a planning commission, our job is to determine if these proposed improper lots meet development regulations, North Logan Code, and the Design Standards Technical Manual. So that's what falls within the breadth of our responsibilities, as this application goes. And this is different than our regular subdivision process. With the subdivision process, an applicant's going to come through a few times. There's concept review, there's development review. And this is kind of a one-time thing review as we worked to make sure that though the subdivision may have been done outside of the subdivision process within the city, we still need to make sure that the standards and codes are met, related to, the proposed subdivision. So understanding that our role is to look at those requirements and make that determination. The first thing that I looked at was what's the process that's written in this new ordinance. And so just as the staff memo noted, the parent parcel, it's been longer than 10 years. I think there's been significant efforts in trying to navigate this and work this. And so I don't feel like there's any question about the application itself, the lots. I don't think there's anything there that concerns me. The land itself, it falls within the lot size requirements, the frontage requirements are there. There's the land available to meet those requirements, and it meets an RE1 zone. So those things are pretty low hanging fruit, clean cut, moving ahead. The next thing that I went to is in the municipal code in 12D-114. Your notes say 115, by the way, but it's 114.
Okay.
The subdivision improvement requirements. And this is what a subdivision has to, fall into. And there's some general terms in there, but ultimately a lot of the design standards are going to fall into the technical manual. Item number 4 in this section, streets and roads providing adequate frontage and access to all the lots. And so that's probably where I spent the majority of my time, evaluating, looking, and a lot of discussion about the proposed application. I believe that with this, just as we would have in the rest of, any other subdivision that would come before us, that the applicant would be required to complete, half the road development for the rural road, which this road falls under standard, in front of their parcels only. And what this would require in that rural road standard is a 22-foot road with 2-foot ribbon curb on the side. And I think there's some swells and that would go. Right. But I do feel like that just as we would require of any other subdivision that we would have to meet, or the applicant would have to meet that requirement. And if I was to give a positive recommendation, that would certainly be a condition of that recommendation. The next thing is, as I looked at that was, what is adequate access to all the lots? And the first thing that we do is we look at the road standards, we look at road design, and what really is adequate. I think a good overall assessment was just provided, so I'm not going to really get into that too much, although I do want to talk about specifically some of the items in the 2018 IFC, which is the International Fire Code adopted by the state, that we use here in the city. The first one is dimensions. So a minimum road access that we would require comes out of 503.2.1, where fire apparatus access roads shall have an unobstructed width of not less than 20 feet, exclusive of shoulders, except for approved security gates in accordance with section 503.6. And unobstructed vertical clearance not less than 13 foot 6 inches. So that is kind of anything that we would deem in the city as an access road. That's the dimension that would be required from a dimension perspective. The second thing I looked at is 503.2.3, the surface. So reading out of the code, fire apparatus access roads shall be designed and maintained to support the imposed loads of fire apparatus and shall be surfaced to provide all-weather driving capabilities. That's as far as the definition goes, that it's hard-packed, could fit a fire apparatus, and all-weather driving. The third thing, obstruction of fire apparatus access roads. So this is 503.4. Fire apparatus access roads shall not be obstructed in any manner, including the parking of vehicles. The minimum widths and clearances established in sections 503.2.1 and 503.2.2 shall be maintained at all times.
20 feet.
20 feet.
20 feet.
Yep. So now we'll get into my assessment or my thoughts. That's kind of the baseline of what I looked at and evaluated or reviewed. So east of the canal, the city staff has been up there, made comments, shared that information. We see it in the staff report. I went up there yesterday, traipsed around, and there is an all-weather road surface which meets the required dimensions of the 2018 IFC. So I don't see any issues with that meeting the code. West of the canal presents questions for me as to if the definition of the fire access road can be met. And so I broke this down into dimensions, surface, and obstruction. So let me talk about dimensions. We just noted here, it is a paved road. So we've got good surface there. It was measured at 16 feet at the widest spot, at least that was in this informal survey that was done. Again, meaning the pavement, and I don't know if beyond pavement, how far he went into the rocks or whatnot. But city staff's reporting 16 feet maximum, average 14 to 15. This is based on them. And I also verified that yesterday afternoon as I went up and run some random measurements. As far as the surface goes, the current road, it's paved surface and pavement averages 14, 15 feet based on those measurements. And one thing that I guess I'm concerned about is beyond the pavement. We read and we know the code says 20 feet exclusive of shoulders. I personally consider the rolling edge outside of the pavement as a shoulder. That's where a lot of the snow is being piled up right now. And so I think this is an issue. This is a variation. I live near the area, so we walk up the road to the cemetery regularly. There's a variation on those sides or shoulders from gravel, lawn, roadside vegetation. There's a whole slew of stuff that's outside of the paved area.
Culverts.
Possibly, yeah, I can't speak to specific culverts. Ron Godfrey's lawn goes right up to the pavement. So this is a concern for me because I don't believe that the lawn and dirt can necessarily meet that surface area that you could drive a 75,000 pound fire apparatus on. So that there's a question and a concern that I have about, can we really meet that 20 feet with 16 feet of asphalt? As far as obstruction goes, the full 20-foot access road, and this is again out of the code, shall be maintained at all times. And so obviously it's not a fire access road right now because it's 11 feet wide. There's many sections of the road that, due to the narrowness of the road, there's not adequate room for the snow to be moved other than it's pushed over Ron Godfrey's vinyl fence or, Kristen Godfrey's wood fence or whatever it may be. And so a lot of that snow is just on the insides of the fences that are placed right there. Some to note, so I walked a lot of this and I caught my tape on Ron Godfrey's vinyl fence and strung it across because there's a whole bunch of trees along that lower fence, or the parcels down there, Kay Gilgan's sister's land. And shortly, approximately in the 20-foot range from hooking the fence, we've got branches. So I'm like, okay, we've got 20 feet. And I turned around and looked, but inside that 20 feet, all up and down that road, I've got utility telephone poles, all the mailboxes, the snow drifts, all fit within that. And so, yeah, we could weave the utility thing and remove trees to try and maintain that 20 feet from just, kind of the obstruction thing. I wanted to note the blue house that's just directly west of the canal. We've referenced the boulders that are sitting there and the width there. I hooked fence and went to fence, and it is 20 feet fence to fence. And obviously all of the snow is sitting inside of that. To me, that 20 feet space there, obviously the rocks that are up above the fence, as Bob had mentioned in the previous meeting, would have to be moved to me the 20 feet there. So that's kind of, I think of all of the things, I think outside of requiring the applicant, just as we would do any other subdivision, to make that roads, in front of their parcels, fit the rural road design standard, 22 feet, ribbon curb. My understanding, the applicant would be responsible for half that road in doing that. Outside of that, and dealing with this section west of the canal, I think, things are met. But I'm extremely troubled with kind of the west of the canal and how do we navigate that. Now, before I go too far into that, I do want to talk about, because I know there's a ton of discussion about east of the cemetery and I don't even know what to call the trail or the road that has a gate across it sometimes that prevents people from driving above, through 2500 north on to Wildercrest. I don't view that as a road or a fire access road. And the reason why I went right back to the fire access road code. And the reason that I don't is because it wasn't designed and is not currently maintained to support imposed loads of fire apparatus, nor, I don't know what the surface is. It's some kind of black stuff. It's not pavement, it's not concrete. So I don't see that as providing, a all-weather driving surface. And it's certainly not maintained. It's got the chain's down, or it was down yesterday. But it hasn't been plowed. Looked like the snowmobiles went through it. I did talk with two fire marshals. Both indicated that they would not take a structure engine across there. That in worst case situations, a 4-wheel drive brush truck or a 4-wheel drive ambulance would be used on that access. The other part about that not feeling like that's an access road comes back to the rural road standard. We've deemed that road, or the collective city, somebody sometime, deemed that road a rural road. And part of the requirements for a rural road is that it is a dead end. And so to open that up as a fire access road, that road would no longer be a dead end road. So the implications of that are now, do we require higher standards of those roads? And we're now requiring curb, gutter, sidewalk, 50-foot road, or whatever it may be. And so we do open up Pandora's box with opening that up. So my interpretation and my view of things, I know everyone likes to use that trail or road or whatever it is as an emergency access. I don't know what it really is. And I can't get a real clear definition of what it is. So that's just kind of some notes on there. So for me to give a positive recommendation, is going ahead, I do believe that we, as a condition of this, we need to require that the rural road standard be met in front of those parcels, as we would any other subdivision. But I also think that the most basic road, a fire access road, the most basic standards be met from 16th East through the applicant's parcels. And this is a public safety thing for me. It's not I know we have small roads and people have private roads and there's lots of things out there, but we have codes and we've adopted codes for a reason. And I firmly believe that having the basic minimum standard is what we should do, and just purely for public safety reasons. And so that's kind of where I sit right now. I'm not throwing the whole thing out. We just have to come up with a solution of how do we deal with 2500 North. I've shared with the applicants, I've shared with the city. I feel like we're a little bit of a standoff because we can't force the applicant to fix 2500 North. And I don't think the applicant can force the city to go in and fix 2500 North. So we sit here at a little bit of a standoff in my position. So there's kind of where I sit and the things that I've found over the last week.
Thanks, Jeff.
Very good.
Dwight?
Can I just get a clarification on innocent owners?
Yeah, so that's part of that lot legitimization code. Essentially, some of the qualifications need to be met is they can't be related in any way financially, familially to the original landowner who divided the property. So you can't just divide your own property, wait for a certain number of years, and then sell those lots without having to go through the subdivision process. That's what we were trying to avoid. And so neither of the applicants are related in that way with the property owner. Also, it has to have been divided at least 10 years ago. So you can't just divide it, wait for a couple months, come in and build and just skip the whole approval process and regulations of the subdivision process. So under both of those stipulations, they meet that qualification.
Okay, very good. Thanks. So
Go ahead.
I guess our bottom line is adequate access.
Correct.
And whether we want to make an exception to the historical and I guess as much as possible city code requirements that we've held for other developers to also have a adequate access to the property. We potentially have 3 homes that we would be obligated to service in the event of an emergency or whatever the circumstance may be. And we also, there's more land to be developed up there, correct?
Right.
So, yeah. So we're talking about 3 right now, but the potential is for more. And obviously, if it's opened up, then it probably would accelerate that process.
There is some limitation. The rural road standard, it could never be more than 25 homes.
Correct. Yeah, the limit total on the rural road, the length of it is 25 homes. There are some existing homes. These 3 homes won't put it over that limit, but there is a cap, at least fronting on that road.
Go ahead.
Question, is the road is improved and that cap goes away?
No, so this road was designated as a rural road, and I wasn't around for the history of it, but it is a historical road. One of the oldest homes in North Logan sits along this road. And in order to keep that character, this, and I believe there were several other roads at the same time, were designated as rural roads. And what that meant is they have a different development cross section that's much more narrow. They don't have a standard curb. They have a flat curb and a swale, keeping a more rural feel, less pavement than our standard road. But as a trade-off to that, being a smaller road, there were some limitations. One of those being the 25 feet, 25 homes maximum. The other one Jeff mentioned as well is that it couldn't be a through street. So this section of 2500 North down to 1600 East was designated as a rural road. And I'm not sure what year that happened, but it was before I came into this position.
Barbara, can you stand up here and talk, please?
We have a history committee
Can you
which I
state
was
your
part
name?
of.
Sorry, Barbara,
Oh,
just for the
Barbara Middleton,
recording.
sorry. We have a history committee in North Logan, and I was part of this when this happened. And Jeff Jorgensen jumped up and said, this is what's going to happen on this road. And this was back in the aught years. I'd have to go back in our history committee notes to look at that. But the concern at the time was they wanted to develop the cemetery. And so they had to do a bunch of bridge work to get over the canal, because that was a horrible access point at that time. And so they looked at how they were going to reconfigure the canal bridge and get up that road. And the concern is the blue house that you talk about, the Beck House, that is one of the oldest houses in North Logan. And we didn't want that to be destroyed in any way, but it still has to maintain that rural road width standard that you expect for emergency access. If there's stuff put out front that obstructs that's an issue in terms of safety, okay? The other part of it is the cemetery commission or the cemetery group, whatever they're called now, they weighed in on that also. And if you look at this land up here, this is all proposed cemetery park. And yeah, it's all this up in here. Those are North Logan parcels. The one that is down closer to the canal, the one that's just east of the canal with that jagged edge, that's still privately owned. And I believe the farmer is still farming some of that land. And that's a decision that can be made in the future. I don't know if that's under right of first refusal or not, but that was being discussed. And this was back in the aught years. So the cemetery commission also did not want to have a through road with the cemetery because they wanted it to be a pastoral type of park. Okay, so quieter. So that's why we looked at rural road together, the fact that it is a dead end. But if there's an emergency with the homes up above, that emergency vehicles could get through there. Now, I'm not sure that's ever been built for fire emergency vehicles, but for smaller vehicles like police or ambulance are possible. I don't know the road standard of that section, but I know it's consistently being violated and neighbors are cutting the chain, people are going through it, and it's the dead end is not there. So that was
Thank you.
part of the history committee years ago.
Thank you for that history.
Question.
Do you have a question?
Who puts up the chain?
North Logan City. So if it gets taken down, we'll be alerted usually really quickly to that, and we'll get up and it's good to know that it's down right now. And city staff member will go up and put that chain back up. And it is like a breakaway type chain. So say if there was an emergency and the conditions were right, they were able to get a brush truck or something through there, they could just drive through that chain.
Comments?
Or
Henry?
can the designation of that road be changed?
I don't know.
You know, they can. We can always change our transportation master plan. Barbara did outline some of the reasons even that I wasn't completely aware of, because this happened before me with the history committee, and why that wouldn't be a through street. So there are a lot of reasons why it was designated the way it was. We'd have to basically determine that those reasons were no longer important enough to keep it at its designation. And we'd have to formally change our transportation master plan in order to remove that from being a rural road.
I think that's something we don't need to address right now anyway. Gray?
I'm Gray Wilson. I just want to clarify, we're not asking to make that a through street. The residents below made it very clear they don't want to. I just didn't want to get off on a tangent that seemed like that's what we're requesting. We're not. Even if for our own selfish reasons, we don't want that to be a busy street, right? Everyone wants to live at the end of the dead end road. One thing, and this kind of goes to what Jeff was talking about, the fire code allows access gates specifically. That does not preclude it from being a fire road. One thing that Bob and I have spoken about, I think if it were to become a condition, hey, you've got to go widen everything west of the canal. My understanding is the city owns the right of way. That's not what the residents want. They don't want their trees taken down. They don't want their fences taken out just because there's the right to do it. They're trying to preserve as much as anybody. One potential solution, and this may just cross the T's and dot the I's, is if there was a better fire gate there, not just a chain across, an actual fire gate, and the section 503 kind of describes what a fire gate is, it has to be able to be opened by one person, and there's a variety of things that makes it a fire gate. But anyway, if it's as simple as make this up to standards, I've discussed with the developer, what does it take to build a road to standards? 6 inches of compacted road base, 4 inches of, you call it 3/4 minus, I don't even know what that means, gravel, so you can compact it and plow across it. If that's what we're talking, if we're saying, look, let's put a gate and make this real, that's a far better solution than saying, take a mile of people's front yards out. Just, it may be a way to make everyone happy. If the discussion is really that this is dangerous, this is a safety issue, whether I build or not, this is a safety issue for everyone who lives below that and everyone who's accessed above it. So there frankly needs to be a conversation amongst the city is, how do we make this safe? And it has nothing to do with me.
Right. I appreciate that. Go ahead, fireman.
Here, come up to the
Can you
mic.
come up to the mic, please?
Tell us your name, John.
My name is John Keller, and I was involved in, well, I was kind of involved in this emergency access. I really didn't plan on having emergency access there. It was done by city council at the time because we had a different way to get into Wilderness because 2300 North was not developed. This was only developed as a Band-Aid effect. Once they build 2300 North, that emergency access is going to go away. That was part of the whole history of it. It's just until they build 23, once 23 is there, that is not going to be emergency access anymore because we'll have a second way up into that area.
Thank you. I think, sure, one more comment.
The future land use plan shows that 23 coming up over. It also shows maybe 2200 east coming across below our property. So if you zoom out, some of you are probably aware.
John, don't go away yet.
Hold on, let me,
No, I wanted to just zoom.
Zoom out.
Just
I
so we
can
see where
pull up the
2200
master
go.
plan too.
Okay, it shows right here. Basically, what I'm saying is, if we're talking about that as a temporary, once that road comes across, when 23 is put in, once that comes across, that's not needed for us either.
Mhm.
There's another way there. So I'm just saying, if we're talking temporary, there's more than one way to do it temporary.
Yeah, and 2300 North is way temporary. A lot. We can't count on 2300 North. John, did you have a question for John?
Yeah, and it's John or Spencer. I'm not sure which. So between the two of you. So when 2300 does come in and you said, okay, that designation goes away, does that mean then that now that road, we don't have to worry about the 20 feet anymore?
No.
And that
No.
standard gets relaxed or does it get?
No, that's always the.
Okay,
code.
it's always going to be there, that 20
Right.
feet. Okay.
But that's for now.
That's
our
the
code.
basic minimum standard for what we would deem a fire access road.
Okay.
When we can't build 66-foot roads, but there's got to be something, or there's access.
Okay.
You see them all over on campus
Mhm.
that they put these fire access roads in. That's the standard that we're
Mhm.
looking at. What's the bare minimum standard to
Yep.
to
So-
provide access to
Yeah.
a
So
subdivision?
every
So-
road in the city needs to meet that
Well,
requirement.
it should.
It's
be,
supposed to
Okay.
be.
But
All right.
we've
From
got a
now on,
long list
yes.
of roads that would
So-
need work.
Henry? Yes, go ahead.
Quick question. If within that right of way, is there enough room to bring services up through there? Public services? And what services are there and what needs to be put in there?
Are we referring to
What is-
2500 north of the canal? Yes, so there, in most places, I think Jeff outlined it pretty well when he walked it. In most places, there is the width, just physically, fence to fence, 20 feet. There are obstructions in the way that Jeff noted, trees and power poles and whatnot. Historically, the city does have a right of way, as noted in the farm survey. That's actually was larger than once we had a rural road that's less right of way that we'll use as opposed to what it was historically. But yes, so on paper, we definitely have the width up to the canal. Physically, there may be some obstructions, but fence to fence, in most places, there is.
I think your questions were about utility stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's transformer boxes, there's fire hydrants, up near their parcels. I think the sewer runs through that road. Yeah, so all the
Okay.
services are already right
Already
there.
there.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Is that power? I don't know where there is.
Yeah, there it is. There's
Power up there.
transformers up there.
Okay.
It goes up. Bob,
I'm Bob Strebel. I'm the other applicant. Maybe I'm not, or maybe it will answer your question, but I've walked that road numerous times, measured it with a tape measure in the summer, and no offense to you guys who went up there and measured it with snow on it. But there isn't a place that there isn't 20 feet from the power poles or a mailbox going the other direction that is a hard surface. That's gravel, road base, something just like the road that goes up to my house. Agreedly, it's not the best fire road and fire access in town. And there are some bushes in the way that could be easily trimmed back. And there is room to throw snow off of that road. There's a lot of open pastures, the pasture in front of Ron Godfrey's home. Across the street, there's room. Nolan Krebs or Beck's, there's room there. There's room in Daly's pasture there that and I think, doesn't North Logan have a snow blower? Not just a plow, but-
I don't know if we have a large snow blower. I'm not the best one to ask though, because I don't drive the vehicles.
My daughter said she saw one the other day, so I don't know, but
Might have been commercial.
and so there is room to throw snow, and really it's the fire code talks about obstruction, but it doesn't really say anything about snow. And I think the reason that does that is because the city has an obligation to clear the roads and remove the snow. And whether you make that adequate for us or not, you need to make that road adequate for the people that live there now and get the snow off the road. And the day I was up there with Greg Humphreys, we were standing at the top by that emergency crossing up at the very top by the cemetery. And it was full of snow then too. And he said the city needs to maintain that a little better.
okay, thank you. Anybody else? I think I have a few comments to make. I appreciate what Jeff said, and I appreciate all of your work on this, Jeff. I think we have to get back down to what we're supposed to do here tonight as a planning commission. Are we supposed to say, yeah, we recommend that they go ahead and do this, even though it is not written in our code? Or do we say, no, we need to follow the code? My concern is, and I would be happy to have those houses there. Personally, I would be happy to have those houses there. But I think as a planning commission, it's our job to look at everything in the city and to work under the rules that we have to work with. So my concern is, if we say, yeah, go ahead, then what happens next week when somebody else comes with another little road and they say, well, hey, you did this. So, I mean, we've gone through this as a commission before. So my concern is all this other things, all these other extra things that need to happen, that the city needs to do and whoever needs to do, is not what we're dealing with tonight. Tonight is what we're dealing with is, do we send on a positive recommendation to the city council to let this go through? Or do we say, this is not our code, we're going to table this until we can work on our code better, or what?
I do recommend, so as far as the role of the planning commission, it is a recommendation onto the city council. That could be a negative recommendation, could be positive, or could be positive with conditions. Those are the three options. I would recommend that this action be taken tonight. No matter what the recommendation is, the applicant has the opportunity to get on an agenda for city council. It can move on, even if it receives a negative recommendation. If it's tabled, the city council often won't hear it because planning commission hasn't said one way or the other. And I think if you take an action either way, that way the applicants will be able to progress on to the city council, and they can tell me if I'm wrong there, if they'd rather have it tabled. But I think an action would probably be the
Yeah,
best.
and well,
Okay,
I
go
was just
ahead.
going to speak. I don't think there's anything to table for. I mean, the argument or the question at hand is, does it meet the code or does it not?
Right.
And that's, ultimately that's the crux of the,
Correct.
I don't
So-
think anyone's asking for exceptions. I think it's just the
No,
argument of, does it meet the code or does it not meet the code?
And so I think tonight, that's what we decide. And there's a whole lot of things that have to happen. It's a unique thing. So I tend to say, I would give it a negative recommendation because it does not meet the code. And I hate to say that, but that's what I would say, but I don't know what the rest of the committee has to say. Go ahead, somebody, if we're ready to make a motion, if we need to talk more about it. This is my first time as chairman, so I just like you to tell me what to do,
You're doing
I'm ready
great.
to
You're
make
doing
a
great.
recommendation, unless there's any other discussion from anybody.
No, and just point of order, I guess, we operate under the Robert's Rules of Order. Is that correct? So motion,
Yeah,
Mhm.
are we ready
motion
to
is
make a
first.
motion?
Okay,
Then if it gets a second, then there's opportunity for discussion.
Right.
And if it doesn't get a second, then it dies for lack of a second.
Correct.
And if there is a second, then there's opportunity for discussion, for further discussion. And then there's a call for the question, so a vote. And then it either passes or fails. So I just want to make sure we understand
That's correct.
the rules of that we're operating under here as a commission.
Good, Dwight. So where are we at, commission?
I'm ready to
Eric's
make
ready
a.
to go, I think.
Eric,
I'm
you
ready to
ready?
make a motion unless anybody else has any other. Okay, so I would make a motion for a negative recommendation for this agenda item 1, the post discussion division approval of an improper subdivision of approximately 6.3 acres at approximately 2100 north and 2100 east and 2500 north.
Okay. Oh, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any opposed? Okay,
Question.
oh.
What- Is this on this motion going forward?
yes.
Then I'd vote no.
You oppose it or you're for it?
Yes, I'm opposing the motion.
Okay, well, there was
Four
four
ayes.
ayes and 1 nay,
And
so
one
it
nay.
carries on.
May I
Thank-
make a comment following that?
Sure.
I think perhaps there's an open door on the east end.
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we can talk about on this situation.
Yeah,
Just pull your mic a little bit closer.
okay. My
As a point of order,
recommendation.
Are we still having discussion or?
No, we're done. We
Yeah, we're
voted,
done.
so we're
I'm-
finished.
okay.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment that I think primarily to the developer and perhaps to staff that it appears that there may be some additional opportunities or options available on the east end to facilitate the proposal. So
Thank you. And we can pass that on to the city. Great.
I was basically going to speak to what Dwight said, Mr. Whitaker, however you prefer to be addressed, but I regret that wasn't a discussion, that it wasn't a discussion of let's, conditional approval upon improve the east end, make the east end meet code. I think there was an opportunity there that was missed. That is regrettable.
Thank you. I think we've learned a lot in this discussion. I think it's been an interesting thing. Hopefully, things can get worked out in a positive way, but we'll move on. Okay? Okay. Spencer. On to a discussion about a potential modification of North Logan City Code water conservation plan requirements within North Logan City for a new development.
Okay, so this is an agenda item from last meeting. Just continuing on, the planning commission requested have one more discussion item before a public hearing be scheduled. If this ordinance is about where we want it, that public hearing wouldn't be in 2 weeks. It would have needed to already be noticed. It would be the meeting after, so it'd be 2 meetings from now, just to give a little preface. So a few things we wanted to make sure people knew. One was addressing the water use and what that cost was going to be, and a way to pass that message on to the home builder from the developer. So one way that this was addressed, and honestly, as I dove into that and tried to find different ways to address it, there are limits as far as the city. So one thing that would be helpful would be a CC&R note. However, the city can't dictate or have anything to do with those CC&Rs, so we can't require that. The one thing we can require is here in section 3, which is that it be noted on the final subdivision plat. The other thing that we discussed is requiring, along with the estimated water use on the landscape plan with the building permit, which would help at least for the first property owner. They're required to submit a landscape plan, that they also run those numbers through our water tiers and have an estimated monthly bill that they're willing to sign off on. So that's included. They'd have to have the total estimated monthly water use based on what plants they have in their plan, and an estimated water bill from the water tiers that are in place. So those were the two big changes that were made. The one thing that I had a hard time addressing was a concern that Jeff raised in the last meeting, which was in the case of a building, home being constructed, say the yard isn't put in right away, the homeowner lives in the home for a couple years and the yard still doesn't get put in that time, sells the home, a new owner moves in, gets a landscape designed all up, puts it in, and at that point, the building permit's already been through. The city doesn't see any landscape plans at that point. There's no mechanism for us to see it. And then they get hit with a surprise really high water bill because they put in a lot of turf and other things that don't necessarily meet the code. They would then either have to just live with that monthly water bill, or rip landscaping out that they just paid for. So I tried to think of a way to avoid this and to try to get that message to be passed on. And ultimately, I couldn't think of a good way to put that in code, other than really just trying to keep an eye out on these neighborhoods. And hopefully the note on the plat, the neighbors will encourage notes in the CC&Rs, but we can't require them with developers. And that's just one issue that we don't really have solved. So that is a concern. If that is a concern that's going to be a deal breaker for this ordinance, we may need to figure out. And the only thing to change with that would be potentially the water tiers to stop that big of a hardship from coming in. So if we lessen the water tiers, it may not discourage overwatering quite as much, but in the case that this scenario happened, it would be less of a blow. So that's that issue. The other thing we talked about briefly at the end was this historically had irrigation rights, does not currently and has not historically had irrigation rights. And there were a couple things that I thought we could maybe do. And I think one of the things that's confusing is the water conservation plan will look different in one scenario or the other. One of those being if it has had irrigation rights or does have irrigation rights, they need to provide secondary water. If it does not have or hasn't historically had irrigation rights, they need to provide this water conservation, have the separate tiered rates, what have you. One thing that's not very clear, and I wanted to get the Planning Commission's feedback, is I could add another paragraph. I wanted to just see if you thought this was too much, just additional or not. I could add another paragraph that basically states if you have historically had water rights, you're in an area that did have canal water, historically was below the canals, essentially, but no longer has those shares, you will need to acquire shares and put in a secondary system, because that's essentially what we're requiring with our water rights ordinance. And this is, in those cases, they wouldn't be able to do this tiered rate system if they've had access in the past. It's only the properties that couldn't go out and obtain shares for their land due to their location. So I don't know if that helps, Eric, at all. I tried to get around kind of the cumbersome wording, but I was struggling to find a clear way that would still cover our bases. So I don't know if that covers the question or if it's just wording.
Do you know, Spencer, from a standpoint of being able to acquire water shares, are they out there?
From what I've heard with the canal companies, they are not typically available in bulk. And they're typically difficult to find. And when you do find them, they're like a one share at a time sort of thing, piece by piece. And so it would be a very difficult thing to acquire shares. That said, we don't necessarily want to make it easy to be able to sell your shares. Just require that the people who move in on the land you developed and moved away from pay a little more for water and be on your way. If they can do secondary, we want to force them to do that.
So this ordinance only applies if secondary water isn't available or they.
Yes, so all of the stipulations with the water bill, the landscape plan, that's only for land that has not historically had and doesn't currently have secondary water shares. So what that essentially means, and there are some exceptions, is why I didn't get as specific as far as landmarks. Anything above this upper canal, it historically, if it's been farmed, it's been dry farmed. There's no water getting pumped up there. The canal companies are very hesitant to have water get pumped up there because it hasn't historically been served. So they don't want to take water away from land that has been served in the past and put it on land that hasn't. That's the area. So it's essentially anything east of the canal for the most part. There may be a few parcels mixed in below the canal, especially as you get further west. There might be a few isolated parcels that just haven't had it. So those may be included as well, which is why it's not defined as just anything east of the upper canal, just so we catch any exceptions throughout the city. So, and all the other property that's say west of the canal has had water shares or has them, that water conservation ordinance is just covered in this first paragraph that states they have to have a secondary water system, all proposed lines, valves, approval from the irrigation and canal companies. And yeah, that it's very straightforward in that case.
When you read that first paragraph, Spencer, and it talks about, there shall be a water conservation plan for assessment. I guess is what we're saying is to the developer, we don't care who does it, but you've got to provide this as part of your plan to build houses here.
Yes, so they would
Essentially, it's
have,
their responsibility.
yeah, the developer would have to provide that
Well, they
study
provide the plan.
with the development plan.
That's
Yeah.
the trouble that I have with it, is that we're requiring the developer to simply submit a plan that says, yeah, we're going to do this. The execution of the plan, there's no enforcement. Because I can go in and buy the lot and the developer has a great plan. I don't even know about it. And they can put stuff in CC&Rs, but the city can't enforce that. I live in a neighborhood that's full of unenforcement of CC&Rs. So that's the troubling with how do we can force development to do it because we control that part of it, but it almost has to go one step further, and that's the building permit process. But even then, I hire a builder, they come in and they do their thing, and yeah, they might have something in there, but does the homeowner really know? And then 3 years from now, when they get around to putting their yard in, it's a free for all because there's no.
And that's Spencer's concern in trying to write this.
Yeah,
up.
I know it's. I don't
tough.
know what the answer.
I don't know what
is.
to
It's
do.
tough.
It is a lot more clear and direct. If they do have secondary water, they will have a plan. The
Yeah.
developer will have to submit it. They'll
Right.
have to have signatures from the irrigation company and the canal company before we approve their subdivision. And they'll have to install the infrastructure before we sign off. So that one's super clear and easy. It's in the.
So are
other
we
case.
forcing that? So in my subdivision, there's secondary water, but it was optional.
Right.
And I do have neighbors that didn't do it just because they didn't like the water company.
Right. Yeah. So as our water system now, in the past, that wasn't the case with our water situation in the recent 3 to 4 years. Every new development that can access secondary water has been required to access secondary water. And a lot of times they're not allowed to have a culinary hookup, even as a temporary or a backup with like a backflow, because that typically becomes your primary. Or say there is a drought, the canal company has to shut down the canal early. Everybody switches to culinary west of the canals. And our system is not prepared to handle multiples of 2 on demand of our water just overnight. So anything new, they have to do a secondary system. That paragraph fleshes it out a little more as to what they'd actually have to be required. The one argument for passing an ordinance, even though we know it's not perfect in every case, is specifically the one we're concerned about is one Jeff stated, and there's always flaws that we find later, as we've seen in many examples. Right now, it's very minimal. And so we're kind of left on, if there's a subdivision above the bench, it's kind of like a negotiation with the planning commission, city council and staff, where we're like, well, we don't have the water for this to approve it just without any restrictions. So we'll have to have restrictions. So then the developer comes in and say, well, what if I restrict it to 15,000? We're like, well, we don't like 15,000. We'll do this. And it just turns into a potential for multiple people to get different standards. And it puts the planning commission, city council in an awkward position. So this would help level the playing field. But like Jeff stated, it is imperfect. And the big issue is if there's a second owner. So I think we can enforce that building permit. We already do require landscape plans with several types of even single family homes, just in the city center zones. So we could require that. If a building permit comes in, doesn't have their landscape plan, I can call the builder, I can call the applicant, the homeowner. It's a small, simple plan. The way we have it outlined, they could get that done at a relatively low cost and calculate these numbers. Not an issue. It's Jeff's example of, say they sit on that landscape plan, they don't build it, they move after 2 years. The landscape plan is who knows where by that point. The new owner comes in and does what they want.
My fear is even it's that the homeowner doesn't even know about it.
Right.
Yeah. And if they don't know about it,
Because I'm a builder, and my job usually ends, the concrete's poured, and I've put little to no yards in ever.
yeah. And if they don't know about it, what will happen is they'll submit their building permit.
Well, no,
No, it's
I'm the builder.
Right.
On behalf of my client, I come in, I get a building permit as the general contractor.
Right.
I build the house, I get my final inspection, I get paid, and I'm wheeling down the road. I don't put the yards in ever.
Right.
And the
Yeah.
homeowner doesn't know anything about the permit. They paid me to build them a home.
Right. Yeah. And we could, one thing we did talk about was having the homeowner actually sign on the landscape plan, which we could, we could do. That would help. Because you're right.
I
was
think
gonna
and
say-
I like that as an information, just an information thing. It's not, other than,
So the question I have, and I like that idea, maybe of the homeowner signing, what happens if the original homeowner signs and then doesn't put in their yard, and 3 years later they sell and move away? Then the new homeowner, how do they find out that they're gonna be required with
You
this
don't.
stuff?
I don't know. that
That's
there's a way to do
that's
it.
the tricky
we
one.
deal with that with CCNRs now.
That would be
Yeah.
CCNRs. It'd be noted on the plat. But I mean, those are things that unless somebody really is taking the time when they buy a house and read through every document,
Mhm.
Well,
you
yeah,
miss
you
it.
don't even get those documents though.
Yeah.
So
Spencer, I'm wondering if there's some way, and we don't want to become uncle, we don't want to be turning neighbors into police force and all of that. But is there something that could be considered for in the title that is passed on
Like the
new
deed?
owners? Like a
Title
In the
deed
as it
or deed of
sells?
trust or
I don't
some
know.
title.
that's just a
May-
transfer of ownership.
Yeah,
I mean, the
maybe-
closest thing you could see is he's suggesting that it's noted on a plot.
on the plat.
But yeah, I wouldn't think I've
So-
ever seen anything in a deed that would.
Maybe you
Yeah.
could
I
call
don't
a
know.
title company and just throw it out or?
We could look into that.
County or
We could
something,
look
but-
into that coming into play. It is just tricky because really our review, there are certain things that trigger a review from the city before they can go through, and building permit is the last one. So once that C of O is issued, then it's so I think short of requiring landscape to be done for certificate of occupancy, which I don't feel is I don't feel like that's
That's
very
not
fair in a lot of
good for
situations. So short of that, I don't think there's a way we have a hook after for review after. So it may just have to be a case by case. I can look into the title. I don't know much about it, admittedly. So I'll have to look into that and see if that's an option.
I mean, I think what we've done is, I mean, it's better than where we've been.
Yeah, I think it's good
I-
to have.
I think
something.
I do like the idea of, I'm sure everyone everywhere deals with that, short of, someday in the future, I'm sure that we'll have, landscape permitting and all sorts of other stuff,
I hope
but
not.
wait a minute.
But we need, I
Um,
think this is
But I
better than
do think,
nothing.
I do like where we've gone, and providing that information. I would, as I throw it out, I think there's things that we can do from an informational perspective to try and educate people better and
Yeah.
more on, I'd like to see the ordinance be even more beyond, I have secondary water, so I kind of feel like I have a little bit of a free for all up there, and that isn't good either.
Right.
I'd like to see, are there other things that we need to look at? Water is a big issue.
Mhm.
And we sometimes, and it's been, I guess, since coming onto the commission, I've kind of squirmed at some of this because every subdivision that comes through, short of a few, but we just, there's water and we just kind of move on. And I don't know, I think it's going to become a bigger issue.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
I agree with Jeff, and that's been one of my biggest concerns on this commission, is that we really need to address water. And we say, okay, go. The developers say, yeah, they have secondary water, here you go. And that worries me. We come to a point where we've got to say, we've got to be more responsible. So I think this is a step
Yeah.
in the right direction. you know.
Yeah.
Is there anything we pass on when we make or pass on that agreement for subdivision, such as a kind of a homeowners association thing that sticks with that subdivision that says that there will be requirements for the amount of, like they have here, how much are over there, that this is passed on by the realtor or by the, I can't even think of the term. It's not the realtor. Who am I thinking of? Help me, please.
Well, yeah, I think that's what you have in CCNRs, and I mean, those things are there. It's just a matter of getting that information from developers and builders to the end user, or the person that's, actually puts the yard in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Can we get something in such as the permits, the people that buy the permits from I can't think of a title company where they are, you've got the right to build and develop it, but the title company puts into the title situation that these lots will have this kind of a situation in there, shrubbery and that kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I'll look into title. That it could get a bit tricky just because there's nothing, as far as a landscape plan goes, if the building's constructed, there's no reason why somebody putting in a yard would think to even come to the city for anything. But if there's a way we can get that passed on, typically the way they do that is CCNRs, codes, covenants, and restrictions. We don't have control over those, can't require it. And that's information that's handed to the homeowner at the time of purchase. Typically, plat is also shown to the homeowner. It's just how thoroughly they go through those documents. And once it's out of our hands and out of our review, past our reviews, the tough thing is it's out of our hands. So we don't know how thorough the title company is going to be or how thorough the realtor is going to be. Those things are legally required to be shown. to a new home purchaser, but how thoroughly they'll review it and how much they'll go over it is kind of out of our control, which gets just a little tricky enforcement wise. And I almost think that the best course of action, I don't know if there's a way to codify this, I can check just logistically, is on a case-by-case basis, both keeping an eye on new subdivisions, new developments, if landscape is being installed after the fact, that we notice that or hear from neighbors or our staff as we're through, that we can go talk to them while they're doing it, say before they lay sod, while they're digging trenches, we can catch them and hopefully save a little bit of time and money in that process. That's imperfect because we don't see everything all the time. The other thing is, if a big water bill just comes through, if there's a way to maybe, and I don't know if we can codify this or not, but if we can work with that property owner at first to say, hey, you were unaware of this, maybe the rate is different for that first month, give them time to correct it and move on. And hopefully those cases will be in the minority, but it is tough to say looking ahead as to what that's going to be. So
Just have a big poster up in the city office. And I'm sure everybody that buys a house goes over to the city offices, right?
Mhm.
But I think it's good to have this, I think we need to,
Yeah. And to have something, I still think with those rates, when you have exorbitant gallonage, that it does cost a lot more.
Mhm.
Because if nothing else, when I move into a place, I would think I can go look at that city code and go, okay, if I bought a house before, I have probably an idea, I would hope, of what kind of water usage I have, and that gives me some clues.
and maybe it's something we have, information that we have to start having our citizens think about.
yeah,
Maybe in the newsletter we say, I don't know, I think everybody has to start thinking about it because we can't enforce it 3 years down the road or whatever. But if people think about it, if you're gonna buy in here,
yeah.
check it out.
And then maybe have some way to work with property owners with after that first bill comes in, if they're willing to
Right.
make some amendments to that landscape, if in the case, the worst case happens. That's imperfect. But I think the big thing to remember here is it feels really restrictive, high water rates, percentages of ground that can be turf and it has to be water wise. All those things feel restrictive, but I think the alternative, and Jeff was kind of getting at it there, is anything above the bench. When you're watering exterior landscape, it's just such a variable as to how much will be used. Somebody could use 40,000, somebody could use 200,000. That when we plug that into our water model, I think we're getting close to the point of those things above the bench on our city water system of us just saying no. So this is a way to be less restrictive than just saying no to development due to water, but it's going to feel more restrictive. Also keeping in mind that those tiers, they're in our master fee schedule is where they would be located. Those would be amended to be less severe as our water infrastructure was improved. So over time, those would relax when we had the capacity to do that. And we could potentially relax some of these requirements if we ever got to that place. But I think this is written for now's standards, and our condition now. So.
Yeah. With the water model that's out, I mean, you talked about them being able to plug those numbers in. Is that water model something that can be developed and maybe even like put on the city's website? People can see it and go play around with it? Or is it something that they have to have? I'm just thinking the more they can do themselves or see it and be visible,
Yeah.
hopefully it gets used and
Yeah.
they're aware of it.
I don't know. I'd have to touch base with engineering. That was a very large project that Lance, our city engineer, coordinated. I don't know what the software behind it. I don't know if that could be put into a web map type of format where you could plug into that information, or if it's in whatever CAD base civil 3D program that they have that they can only run on their massive PCs. So I could touch base with them on that, but either way, I think having quick information available on water, irregardless of if we can get the actual model on there,
Mhm.
I think it should be a
Yeah.
priority.
And
Yeah.
I like Eric's suggestion. I mean, on our city website. I'm sure, I mean, I know that I have looked in different places that we've lived. I've checked out the city website, see what the city's all about. That would be a good place to say,
Mhm.
here's our water restrictions or whatever.
Yeah,
At
and
least
just
it's out there. The more information we can get out, the better.
right. And just a heads up, we are working on that currently. The city council and several members, Emily is one of the newer members. That has been a goal of theirs, communication. So the website's kind of getting a refresh. And then also just kind of trying to find ways to get this out. This was actually discussed last night as well. So you're really right in step with the city council on that front, not just with water, but other zoning, subdivision process, along with your streets information, all of that information, finding ways to make that easily digestible and accessible on our website and in social media channels, I think is going to be a big key. I do think water should be a big focus of that, both for these areas affected and in general, and try to make it simple. And if we could get some sort of interactive map feature, I mean, that would be very helpful.
And I, yeah,
Yes.
So what do we need to do with this topic now? Do you need a recommendation from us?
Yes, so
To move forward and have a public hearing? That's where
exactly.
we're-
So if you're comfortable enough with this, that you want to hold a public hearing, I would get that scheduled again, not for next meeting. We passed that notice deadline, but for the meeting after. If you're comfortable with where it's at, if there are some things you want tweaked, or you're not comfortable with that kind of scenario that we've outlined, and you feel like we need to flesh that out, I can try to go back to the drawing board and see if there's a way to make it pencil. So, yeah.
I think it sounds good. Anybody else?
just trying to think if there's any unforeseen consequences.
Well,
We've
Well,
not
we'll-
considered, but
We'll find them next month.
Yeah,
I think it's a good starting point. to go
yeah,
from
maybe
here.
just
yeah.
taking into consideration the discussion tonight, some of the points that have been brought up, but yeah. Take a look at those. If you can incorporate them into code that you've already got, then great. If not, I think we're comfortable moving forward with as we see it on the screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Comment?
Chairman, I move that we go forward with this and you put it to a vote if we need to put it. to a
I
vote,
don't,
do
we
recommend
don't need to
it?
vote on this, right?
All right.
Yeah,
We're
no,
just-
that was the right idea. This one is a discussion item. So no action tonight, but just a general
Right.
feeling. If you're, Heron, sounds like everybody else is kind of feeling like a public hearing in two meetings from now is sounding like is what we should go for.
Sounds
And I'll
good.
try to rework it a little bit if I can, based on what I've heard tonight.
Okay,
Okay, good.
good. Okay, discussion about planning commission training topics for the upcoming calendar year and overview of the general plan and its individual elements.
Okay, so basically I'll skip, so I'll leave the general plan discussion for another night. But I wanted to give just a brief kind of update on that. Budgets and different things for the departments are coming up for the fiscal year. One thing that I'm going to focus on in the budget for the planning department is getting an update on our general plan and potentially working with a consultant on that to get that updated. Our last full update was 2013. So we probably take it section by section, and planning commission will be very involved in that. The general plan is one of the key elements. Just as a whole, if you want to look at that and get more information on that, it's on our city website, just northlogancity.org. And I wanted to just go there with you now so that it was clear. Like I said, our city website's being updated as it's not necessarily the easiest to navigate right now. Up top, you've got tabs, departments, and then community development is the planning department official title. Right here, this first link is your general plan. And so you can click on that, download it. You can see that it's from 2013. And it's got our transportation plan, it's got a community plan, land use, our housing, moderate income housing, that's been updated. Several of these elements have been updated through the years individually, but taking an overall look, I think would be a very beneficial thing where this is from almost coming up on 10 years, 9 years ago. So that's a heads up there. The other thing I wanted to mention with this discussion point was just trainings. I believe those trainings we've had in the past, just brief updates from me about subdivision process, conditional use permits, those sorts of things have been very helpful. And I wanted to just hear either tonight, if there were any ideas for future trainings or things you want to learn more about. I could also bring staff members in. I'm sure they'd be really excited to come in on a Thursday evening, but I could get Public Works, I could get Jordan, I could get Lance from engineering. John is lucky enough to be here with us, and we're glad to have him here.
He is lucky.
He can always help us out with fire code things. So you may not have all the ideas tonight. I do want to go over goals and trainings kind of in February, because we'll have one member trade out. We're going to miss Eric at that point, but I want to wait until we have that group in to set yearly goals. But I wanted to get people thinking about what things they'd want to be trained about, so I can add them to the list and get them on agendas. If you have anything tonight, I'd be happy to write them down. And then other than that, let you think about them, and we can discuss them in the future.
Anybody have anything tonight?
I do. I just want to share my experience. The best training is adequate time to get into the current topics that are ahead of us.
Right.
And, fortunately, I knew what tonight's agenda was a few weeks ago, and, was able to really dig in, but that's not always the case for everybody. I know we've asked for adequate notice. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm really this is a real sincere request, because I know the city council gets their information, like the weekend. Can we please, especially if there's an actionable item? I mean, I'd really like the commission to say, we're not taking action on something unless we've had 3 or 4 days,
Right.
in fairness to the citizens and fairness to us. But I'll be honest, I'm not going to get anything out of sitting in a PowerPoint. What's been really good for me is there's a topic that's coming up, and I'm forced to really dive in and understand. How I learned about zoning and densities was the Canyon Gates subdivision proposal. It forced me to really understand, how that density works. And this is just Jeff, but, sitting in a training or whatever is probably not the best use of my time, as much as if we can really have a little bit of runway, especially on some of, the rezones, and we all know the ones that are going to be tougher than others. But anything, that we're really being asked to take action on, I would really like to have some time to really get in. And that would be the most beneficial training for me, is just to have adequate time to prepare for topics.
Me too.
Probably
I
at
like that. I like,
At
Oh,
least,
sorry.
at least 48 hours minimum.
yeah. But I also, and I agree. I was happy to come tonight with a little bit of information that we got earlier, which was earlier today. But also, it would have been helpful for me when I first got on the committee. And I don't want to sit and listen to a lecture, but to have review of this. These are the zoning regulations. I mean, I was told, go read section whatever, go read that. I read it, and I'm not a lawyer. I don't get it, So I think a lot of just little snippets of, these are the zoning regulations. This is what it means. This is what a R12, R15, R12, R10, because I had to go in and figure that out, and I still get confused. So I think at least for me, and I'm not going to be here that long, maybe everybody else has got it figured out. Just little training on all of that, but mostly have ahead of time so we can come informed and do our research. And I was grateful for the research that Jeff did on the canyon gates and tonight. So that's my suggestion too. So there you go.
Yeah, as you talk about zoning, because I think that is one that comes up over and over. And to be able to say, okay, here is just the straight out, here's what the zone means.
Right.
But then you got the density determinant option. And maybe that's one thing where you say, okay, everybody bring your calculator. And let's figure
Right.
out, give us some numbers. And does this meet zoning or not? I don't know. That maybe is getting too much into school.
But that would
that's-
be
Ways to
helpful.
learn.
That
A
would have
lot
been
of what we
helpful.
do is administrative, right? We,
Yeah.
meets code, but the zoning is not, it's
Right.
legislative. And that is the area we all cringe for rezones,
Right.
right? Because they're challenging, they're controversial, there's some
And then
subjective.
there's the extra stuff like the population density, all that stuff. And I've gone in and read it and read it and read it. And if somebody would have explained it to me in a more simpler term or said, yeah, get out your calculator, this is what this means, I would have felt more able to make a smart comment or a smart thought or something. So that kind of
Mm-hmm.
training quickly, we don't have to spend lots of time on it, but
Perhaps the Utah League can help us with that too, with some
Right.
specifics and examples and.
Yeah, and I could take specific areas that we have and what the zoning density count. I could go through a couple of things really quickly, and especially right at first, and Heron will be the first person that I'll need to sit down and get a time schedule to go over this with. So yes, no, that's helpful.
But when we have a meeting where it's already 8:15, 8:30, 9 o'clock, nobody wants to stick around for a training,
Right. Yep. So they could be at the end of the agenda. We can skip them at the end.
Well,
if we
I
need
would
to.
propose when nights when we don't have stuff or
Let's do
very
that.
much stuff, I
Yeah,
think we're better served to focus on some of those things that we really have a big impact or cause a lot of stress for us.
which
to,
is
to
zoning.
take the public meeting that we have and let's work on some of these topics or discussions as a group and take advantage of the time that we have and then cram some of that stuff in to a later meeting. I don't know.
So I
That's
think
just-
what you're hearing is there's no off nights.
I- yeah.
Right?
You could just get people to not, want anything.
Oh, and it ebbs and flows.
It
We
does.
need to address the applications and that are there, but I do think that there's probably opportunities and I view them as a priority, or they should be, because I know as a new commissioner, you stumble around for quite a while till you get a little more comfortable with things. Just
Yep.
Okay,
my honorary opinion.
anything else? I mean, I think we agree. Is that it, Spencer?
That's it for me. Yep.
Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Any seconds?
Second.
All in favor?
I
Any opposed? Okay.
And Dwight.
Oh, okay. Okay, did you get this one? Okay,
Perfect.
all right. Thanks, everybody. We made it through.
Point.
And congratulations, you did a great job.
yeah. Hey,
well done.
all right.
Yes.
Thank you for all your research.